Today I'm going to talk about capital punishment and its role with society and how it affects social issues. To begin, capital punishment is widely controversial. It's a very polarizing issue. It's become a politicized issue. It didn't originally start that way. Uh, but to begin, I am firmly against the death penalty. It's ineffective. It unfairly targets the poor and minorities, and it executes innocent people. And I'll talk a little bit about all of these things and the solutions that I have to maybe remedy this situation. So to begin, it's not an effective deterrent. A wise man once told me an effective deterrent is swift, is certain, and is public. And our current system is none of these. There needs to be somewhat of a direct correlation between the crime committed and the punishment given out. With our current legal system, not everyone gets treated the same. Not everyone gets sentenced the same. And we go over that a little bit when it comes to, minorities and impoverished people. Prisoners spend an average of 192 months behind bars before their execution date, which is just it's not swift, and it needs to be swift in order for us to consider it an effective deterrent. It's also not public. The executions are pretty much kept, under wraps. It's not a public spectacle like it was back in the day, back in the colonial times when we originally were setting up, our foundation and our rules. Next, I want to cover race, because statistically, our criminal justice system it systematically targets people from lower socioeconomic groups, minorities, the poor. Prosecutors are known to use race to win. They know that it's easier to get a conviction when the defendant is black than when the defendant is white. It's easier to get a conviction when the murder victim was white and not black. The odds of a black man getting the death penalty are exponentially higher than a white male or female getting the death penalty. 85% of the condemned were sentenced to death for murders of white people. So it's definitely way off counterwise. And then the poor just have very little representation in court. They're given public defenders, and they're made to somewhat fend for themselves. These lawyers, probably great attorneys, but not anything that the super elite or the super rich could possibly afford. Next, I want to talk about false convictions, and it is a pretty small percentage of prisoners who are falsely convicted. But that isn't an excuse to keep killing people who we are not certain that are guilty of the crime. There's this new kind of thinking, and it's called the innocence revolution. And I discussed this in my paper a little bit about how people are they're going more off of evidence and scientific fact rather than rather than being pitched like in a courtroom. DNA advances have liberated hundreds of people from death row, and hundreds more from lengthy sentences, whether it be life or some other long stretch of time. We are murdering our own people with better options being readily available to us. Which I can't accept. I can't wrap my head around that. It's cruel and unusual, is what it is. It's cruel and unusual. People say that the way we're executing people is humane. They argue that lethal injection is okay. It's better than a firing squad. I hear that a lot, or from a lot of pro death penalty supporters. But the ultimate question is, who are we to determine who gets to live and who gets to die? Why are we? It's more of an ethical question than anything. It's a matter of valuing someone else's life, even if they didn't value someone else's. I mean, it's the ultimate form of suffering. It's the ultimate form. You're dead. There's no coming back. There's nothing. The solution to this, and I think it's the smartest, the best route that we can go, would be alternative sentencing. It is statistically been proven that life in prison is more economical, and it can also be argued that, the victims of the families get to digest everything. They get to know that that person is going to be behind bars for the rest of their lives. They'll never be able to do that to any other person, or ever. So I don't see the difference between alternative sentencing, getting hit with a life sentence, or the death penalty. It just doesn't make sense because it's not economical and it's not doing its job originally. So alternative sentencing, which is being a deterrent, excuse me. So alternative sentencing is the best way to go. Like I said, some people will argue it robs victims' families of seeking a sort of justice or retribution for what they've lost. But at the same time, I feel as if knowing that that person is miserable every day, knowing that that person will never see the light of day outside of, a jail cell, like, ever again. I feel like that'd be way more soothing to me. I'd be more at peace knowing that the person who did this was behind bars forever and it was miserable. So in conclusion, I firmly believe the death penalty should be abolished. It is an ineffective deterrent. All the data points to that. With the racial prejudice and how attorneys and the system kind of pinpoints minorities and the impoverished, I think is disgusting. And innocent people are being put to death, without a doubt. It's a fact. Innocent people have been put to death. Alternative sentencing is the future. I firmly believe that if we eliminated capital punishment and just sentence people to life in prison, it would be more economical, it would be more humane, and it would be better, arguably, for victims. I think that's all I have today. My references are listed on the last slide. Thank you for listening.